What was the first crime you committed?
The first mortgage I ever did.
A mortgage is me borrowing money from a bank to buy a house.
Yeah.
How can you find a way to commit crime in this? How can you do fraud in this space?
It's very difficult for the average guy to commit fraud because there's so many safeguards set up. If you were to go in and say, I make $300,000 a year. Okay, well, we want your W-2s. We want your pay stubs. We're going to call your employer. We're going to check to make sure your employer, how long they've been incorporated. We're going to check to make sure they're registered. It's like, your whole plan fell apart, because the average guy can't do that. He can't even come up with the pay stub and W-2. So the average person, or I'm going to put down this much money, but you're going to borrow that money from the seller. Okay, well, then they start asking for bank statements. Where did the money come from? How long has it been in your bank? Like, you can't even have it put in your bank for a day, get a letter. It's got to have been there for 90 days or 60 days, depending on the bank. And so there's all these ways for the average person. It's very difficult to commit fraud. The average guy that works at Walmart and makes $60,000 a year, and he's been there for 5 years, and he saved his deposit. Like, that's really the guy that those transactions are set up for. To borrow a mortgage from Bank of America, that's the guy they're looking for.
So to commit fraud in this space, you have to misrepresent some aspect of your identity, of how much you're worth, how much money you have, this kind of stuff.
Right. You have to be able to lie to the bank. Anytime you lie to the bank, you've committed fraud. And it's funny, when I was, doing it, I would say, it's in the gray area. There's no gray area. You're either lying in some capacity or you're not. So for instance, the very first loan I did, I whited out. My borrower had been 30 days late on her rent. So they're really looking at the last 2 years. So when you go into the bank, and most of what they're asking is a 2-year window. They're saying, how long have you been on their job? They care about 2 years. And how long have you been at your residency? They're looking for 2 years. Now, you could be at 3 places in 2 years. That's fine, as long as you consistently paid for 2 years. Well, she had been in an apartment complex, but she'd been 30 days late. Now, she caught it up, but she was late. The bank doesn't want to lend you money if you've been 30 days late. So I was a broker, and I whited out the 30-day late. I just got rid of it. And my manager is the person that told me to do it. She said, it'll be fine. And she was right, it was.
What did it feel like? So that was the first fraudulent action you committed.
Yeah, I was worried. I was say, I sweated bullets for 4 or 5 days. But I was concerned, and I don't know that I was concerned that I had broken the law. I was concerned because I was behind on my truck payment. I was behind on my mortgage. Like, I had banked on being a mortgage broker, and I'd gone deep behind on all my bills to do this. So in the last minute, when this loan isn't going to close, and I have to commit fraud to make that happen. And the idea, my fear was they were going to figure it out, and maybe I'd get fired. I didn't think I was going to go to jail, because my manager assured me, you're not going to jail. Like, you'll get fired at best. So my concern was they were going to catch it and I get fired and I wouldn't get paid. Like, I needed that money so bad.
So maybe paint the picture here. Where were you working? Who was the manager?
The manager it's funny because I don't think I ever really mentioned this. Her name was Gretchen Zayas. She eventually, I don't mind saying it, she eventually ended up going to jail for fraud. Her name was Gretchen Zayas, and she was the manager. I was working for a company called Eagle Lending, and it was in Tampa. And this was like my first month. So it was my very first deal, 3 or 4 weeks into that first month. And I walk in, I put the file in front of my manager. She looks through everything, oh, great, good, and put this one piece of paper over here and sat there. And then when she was done, I said, what's going on? She goes, perfect, file's perfect. She goes, but your borrower was 30 days late on her rent. And she says it's done. She's like, that's a deal killer. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I remember she pulled out a thing of whiteout, Remember the whiteout, not the
Mhm.
sticks, but the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she started going, and I was like, "What?" She goes, "If I was you," and she said, "I'd white it out, make a copy, stick it back in the file."
Yeah.
She said, "It'll be fine." And I went, I was like, that's fraud. I could go to jail. And she was like, they're never going to catch it. She said, "Look, we do stuff. I do stuff all the time." She said, "They're not going to catch it, and nobody's calling the FBI." She goes, "The worst case scenario, if underwriting catches it, then they'll fire you. That's it. Nobody's calling. You're not going to jail." And I was, I trusted her. I was like, okay. And so I did what she said. I stuck it in the file, and I mean, like I said, for 4 or 5 days, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so scared."
How old are you at this point?
Probably 29. I think it was 29.
Yeah.
Like I had gone to college and so many things had not worked out. I got a degree in fine arts. It's not, there's not a lot of people looking for anyone with a fine arts degree. And, I tried to be an insurance adjuster, tried that for about a year and a half. That didn't work out. Ended up working construction for a few years. And, so finally the girl I was dating said, "You got to be a mortgage broker." She's had just started as in the mortgage industry.
Mhm.
And she was like, "You have to do this. Like you were born to do this. This is perfect for you."
What did she see in you?
She said, "You're a salesman." And I was like, cause I was like, I barely balanced my checkbook. Like, I don't know anything about numbers. And she's like, "It has nothing to do with that. It's sales. It's putting together deals. You're good at that. You're good at negotiating. You're a natural salesman." And I figured I needed to try something.
So, what aspect of mortgages is sales and deal making, and what aspects require the charisma that you clearly have?
Well, one, you have clients that have lots of options. They can go to Bank of America, they can go to SunTrust, they can go to Chase. They have options if they have perfect credit. I ended up working for a company that was a subprime lender, and those people didn't have a lot of options. Honestly, by the time they got to Eagle Lending, their options were over. So what ends up happening is you're negotiating with sellers. You would think that a lot of the stuff that in that industry that real estate agents should do, the brokers end up doing, because real estate agents are used to, you meet them at the house or they take you to several houses. They open the door, they walk around, they write up a contract that's legit,
Hmm.
a legit contract, and you're already pre-approved. Everything works out. But subprime, that's not the case. You got borrowers with horrific job history. They don't have enough of the down payment. Maybe they have the down payment, but they don't have the closing costs. So you have to go to the real estate agent and say, "Listen, I need you to raise the purchase price and have the seller pay the closing costs," which is legal, but that's not, to a degree, but that's not how they wrote up the contract. So now you're having to get them to rewrite the contract, or there's little things you're trying to do. And the more deals you get done and the more you deal with certain real estate agents, the more you start to realize that you know which ones are completely above board and which ones are willing to twist the rules.
And a lot of it works on personal relationships.
Right, right. For some reason, people tend to like me
Mhm.
and trust me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It hasn't worked out for so many people, but people naturally seem to trust me. And so if I say, "Hey, I can close the loan, but you got to do this, it'll be cool. Don't worry, we do it all the time." It's like my third loan. And, I don't know, I've been doing this for years. And they go, "Oh, okay." And then they raise the purchase price. They add some money. They have the seller of the house give the borrower some money. They stick it in the bank, or they put it in escrow at the closing company. Like now you're starting to massage deals.
What was the second time you committed a crime? So how did it start to evolve from the whiteout?
Well, I mean, when that went through, I I think a normal person probably would have said, "Wow, it was a one-time thing, got away with it. Whew, I'm good." But for me, it just emboldened me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just got a check for I don't know what it was, $2,500, $3,500. I was thrilled. And by that time I was already working on another deal. But that guy, he made, I forget, something like, he had made like, let's say $45,000 the year before in his W-2. If you, based on his current track record or his year to date of his pay stub, he made just enough money. But if you factored in last year's W-2, he was shy. So if I change that 45,000 to 51,000, then the loan closes. I get a check for $3,500. He gets into a house. I'm doing him a favor. I'm doing God's work. So I fix it. I kick back. I'm terrified a little bit, worried about it. Sure enough, it closes. 4 or 5 days later, they call me. He's ready to close. A week later, we close. I get a check. Next guy that comes in, I got very, very quickly. I was concerned. Do you have a house? Do you have a deal? Is it ready? I can get you done. Now, if you were in bankruptcy or something, there's some things you'd pull their credit and you just couldn't help them if they had a 550 credit score or something and no job. It had to be within reason. But very quickly, it was changing W-2s, changing pay stubs, changing appraisals, fixing, like I said, verifications of rent. So it evolved very quickly for me.
And you're essentially helping people.
That's what I told myself.
Giving them a chance. People that have been really struggling financially in life. So you've been telling yourself that you're doing a good thing for people.
I told myself that right up until that those loans were solid and I was helping those people out right up until I went to prison. And I was in prison and I had to write, the government asked me to write an ethics and fraud course to help teach the nation's mortgage brokers. All loan officers and brokers have to take, I think it's 9 hours of continuing education every single year. And I was approached to write the ethics course. And it was about that time and about the same period of time I was writing my book. And that kind of, I started reflecting on what I had done. And the truth is, and this is a horrible thing to say, because the first time I ever heard somebody say this, I remember thinking, oh, that's a horrible thing to say. Some people should not own a house. They shouldn't be allowed to borrow. They're not in a position financially, and there were many occasions where I put someone in a house that they 100% swore they could afford. I was helping them. I told myself I was helping them. And a year and a half later, they're going into foreclosure. Their stuff's on the corner. They don't know where to go. And the truth is that I'm not smarter than the actuaries that came up with those underwriting guidelines.
So in this whole process, how are you making money? Are you taking a percentage?
Broker fee. Yeah, I charge a broker fee. Or you charge yield spread. So yield spread is, let's say the interest rate is 8% interest. If I charge them 25 basis points over the 8%, so I charge them 8.25, 8.25, then I get 1% of the loan back as a fee. So if I charge them 8.5%, I get 2 points back. So if it's a $100,000 piece of property and the bank says your interest rate is going to be 8%, and I tell you 8.5, and I'm charging you a $3,500 broker fee, now I'm making $5,500. So on even a $100,000 loan, you could make a nice chunk of change.
So how much gray area is here? You said that there really isn't when you're lying or not, but
it
feels
like
lying, there is.
Well, every time I changed something, it wasn't gray area. I just committed fraud. At this level, you either meet the guidelines or someone has massaged it in such a way that they've committed fraud. That's it. And there's tons of ways where you can commit fraud and they just can't figure it out. Does that make sense? You've committed fraud, and it's like they look at all the documents and they double check everything, and they know there's fraud in here. They just can't find it.
But just because they can't find it doesn't mean it wasn't
exactly. Doesn't mean it wasn't fraud.